Hey, what's up, mammal nerds? This is the rest of our Lagomorpha order lesson. So we're still in the family Leporidae, but this time we're going to talk about the snowshoe hare rather than the eastern cottontail. This is a picture that I took of a snowshoe hare in Utah. This might have been the very first one that I've ever saw in the wild. So let's have a look at the range map for the snowshoe hare. These are definitely a northern species, right? They look like they're interested in badass winter conditions. So all throughout Canada, up into Alaska, down the Rocky Mountains here. Remember we talked about the eastern cottontail not being able to handle that. But I would like you to check out New York State here as well. So one thing that you need to know about most maps is if they're going to cover like where the animal lives in the entire world, they're not going to have real fine detail to them. So this makes it look like they're in just about every part of New York State except Long Island. And we know that that's really not true. Like there's no snowshoe hares in Monroe County, for example, if you're a Rochesterian listening to this. So we can't expect it to be nuanced unless we looked at an exact map of New York State. Before we get anything into anything like that, I would like to compare the two maps here. So on top is still our snowshoe hare, and then the bottom is our eastern cottontail, and you can see that there's several places where they overlap, and New York State is one of those places. So we within our state we have both of these guys, and should expect to be able to find them. Well, how common are snowshoe hares within New York State? This is a map that I pulled off of the DEC's website, and we looked at one of these already, remember? We looked at one of these for the possum. So the state is broken into what are called wildlife management units. That's what each of these boundaries are. And here we are in region 8 here. Every wildlife management unit that begins with an 8 is part of our region. And you can see that in white is an area where there's no snowshoe hare hunting. That's because essentially there aren't any snowshoe hares here. So we've got this Great Lakes plain area, and then we've got downstate. And then in orange, there's only about a month, well, exactly a month, of snowshoe hare hunting. And then in the yellow, you can see, my goodness, they can hunt snowshoes from October 1st to March 15th, and the bag limit is 6. So my guess is the Adirondacks up here has the most snowshoe hares, right? Because they have a very long season and they allow you to shoot 6 a day. That leaves the Catskills and the central part of the state here with more than a month of a season, about 2.5 months it looks like here, but again back to only 2 per day for that. So we look at these clues to try to give us an idea of where snowshoe hares are found and about how common they are. Oh, and by the way, I don't see the word snowshoe hare anywhere here. In fact, they're called varying hares. So we're running into, for the first time, a species that we're covering in class that has more than one common name. So I'm going to always call it snowshoe hare, but varying hare is also a common name that's acceptable for this species. And if you were to put that on the test, I would take that. Anybody know why they're called varying hares? Well, because they change color. This species is brown in the summertime and white in the winter months. So it varies from brown to white and then back from white to brown again. So hence the name. Cool. Most of my pictures of snowshoe hares are from Canada. This one is actually from Newfoundland. And I know it's not a fantastic picture, but it's showing exactly what I want you to see. I want you to know that snowshoe hare tracks are going to look very much like the tracks that we saw from the eastern cottontail. Their feet are much larger, hence the name snowshoe hare. But you've got 2 fronts that land like this, and then the 2 hinds are going to land in front of those and give it that characteristic look there. Are you going to be able to identify the snowshoe hare or the eastern cottontail on the test? Like, I'm going to be giving you a test where you're going to get mammals and you got to tell me who they are. So I'm telling you, you got a 50-50 chance if you just take a guess here. Snowshoe hares are best known for their big back feet and for their white color in the winter. But what if I give you a summertime picture like this one? And oh, by the way, that back foot completely hidden. Are you going to call this an eastern cottontail, or are you going to call this a snowshoe hare? Well, let me start by saying this. I think this is an unfair question for the test because we're at the 100 level, right? We're just learning this stuff. I can tell what this is, and I'm going to tell you why in just a moment. But I really want you to get a fair test question, and this one I think is a little bit too hidden here. But if you did say snowshoe hare, you are absolutely correct. Would you look at that gigantic Mennonite sideburns there, eh? Those are not ever found in a in an eastern cottontail. The animal is just a bit too light in color. It's a little too stocky looking in the face. The ears are the wrong shape. There's a lot of clues for you here that this is not an eastern cottontail. What if I asked you if this was an old or a young animal? Well, a lot of times people think that it's old because it's got that long hair there and it looks white. Check out that white spot. That betrays that this is a young snowshoe hare and not an older one. Another snowshoe hare. This was in Quebec, Canada. This was just 2 summers ago. And you can see the white spot on the head. Again, so this is a young animal. And this guy, again, looks just the wrong shape for our eastern cottontail, the wrong color for our eastern cottontail. Do you see that there? Can you tell what that is? Yep, that's a tick. And snowshoe hares particularly can really get ticky. They seem to be really prone to them. Here he is up on his hind legs on full alert here. We were walking down this trail, my wife and I, hiking, and this guy wasn't quite sure what to do. Should I run? Should I stay? And so I was able to get a few decent shots of him. I do want to point this out. Sorry, before I go. Do you see the white on the edge of the ear there? That's a great characteristic to look for that you're staring at a snowshoe hare. Okay, I promised you I would teach you how to tell rabbits from hares. And the secret, well, there's some skeletal ones, but we won't crack any of these guys open. The secret is to look at the babies. Do you remember that term that I used when we talked about rabbit babies? It was altricial. And precocial is literally the exact opposite. Instead of being naked, blind, and helpless, you're fully furred, eyes open, and mobile. So baby hares look like miniature adults. Baby rabbits look like pink little wrinkly naked skinny things. Every rabbit in the world is altricial. Every hare in the world is precocial. These are a pair of baby rabbits that are, excuse me, I'm sorry that I screwed that up. These are a pair of baby snowshoe hares that I found in Canada, and I want you to notice that white edge to the ear, showing you that these are indeed snowshoe hares. Okay, let's practice these 2 words, and I will pronounce them for you again. Altricial or precocial. I will give you some mammals, and you will guess which they are. But first, a shameless plug for a class that I teach in the fall. And I will advertise this again when we get to black bears, but by then registration for the fall semester might already be over. Guys, I teach a class called Black Bear Management. It's a 1-credit class in the fall. It's 2 credits in the spring. And most years we get to actually go to a bear den, help the DEC, and handle some bear cubs and take some measurements and do some statistics for those guys. This was a couple years ago, one of my students at the time, and we were here taking a picture of this. Excuse me, I took the picture of the bear cub. We were measuring its ears and weighing it, try to guess how old it was. Bears are born precocial. They're tiny. They're born half a pound, and we'll learn more about that when the time comes. By the time we get to see them, their eyes are already open, they're fully furred, and they're much bigger, weigh a couple pounds. So I'm talking about what they're like at birth, not necessarily what you get to see. I'll let you keep looking at that cute bear cub while we go through this quiz. You ready? Question 1, possum. Altricial or precocial? Yeah, you can't get any more altricial than the possum, right? Absolutely. Remember, baby possums are completely helpless. They're called joeys. They're born so underdeveloped. All of the marsupials have altricial babies. Cool. White-tailed deer. Well, if our only choice is altricial or precocial, I got to go with precocial on this one because white-tailed deer are able to run from a predator right away. Not that that's their first strategy. They really try to hide because they can't run very fast, but they definitely are mobile. They're fully furred. They've got that brown fur with the white spots on it, and their eyes are certainly open. I think all of the hoof stock, all of the animals that have hooves everywhere in the world are probably precocial. Not that I know of every single species, but that would be my guess. Killer whale. All right, just for a second here. Before you give me your guess, can I just say, if your first instinct was to stop this and send me a message that says, sir, we did not cover killer whales in this class, I just need you to turn that part of your brain off. I want to be able to teach you two concepts here, altricial and precocial, and then have you apply it to things that we didn't even necessarily learn in class. You know enough about killer whales to tell me if their babies are altricial or precocial. And what do you think? Well, if you said, haha, just kidding. If you said precocial, then you are absolutely correct. Why do killer whales have to be precocial? Well, they can't be helpless, right? Whales born in the water. Whales breathe air. What happens to altricial baby whales? They drown. So even if we don't ever study killer whales, you have to know they must be precocial. Okay, last one. This one's a bit of a toughie. Humans. Well, having had a baby human living in this house, I can assure you that they're altricial. And here's why. Human babies are not born necessarily naked, right? They have some hair on them. They're not born with their eyes cemented shut, although babies can't see perfectly when they're first born. But the key here is baby humans are useless. They're a bag of bones. They can't help with chores. They can't drive you to the store. They can't run from predators. They're completely useless. So that's what makes them altricial there. Okay? Great. I'm not saying babies aren't great. I'm just saying they're altricial. Okay. I have experience with a couple other species of hares. When we were in Norway, these were mountain hare babies that we found, and there were just piles of them. Like we got there, it was during the summer months, and they had a big boom crop that year. And just seems like everywhere we drove, we'd find this thick patch of vegetation, and there would be a bunch of these baby hares just there. And instead of being well equipped to get away from predators, these guys just have lots of babies. So that was just kind of interesting. Oh, by the way, you see almost the exact same white rim on the ear. It doesn't quite go up as high as our snowshoe hare does, but this hare also has that. I think they're really cute. These are the ones where the babies genuinely are adorable. Not this one. This guy looks a little frightening here with that close cropping there. I have a video just only about 30 seconds long on my YouTube channel, so if you want to go and have a look at that, you can. They have all got these cute little faces. All right, let's take a look back at our snowshoe hare here, and we'll go through the paces. I took this picture in Yellowstone National Park in June, and you can see the only parts on this hare that are still white are the rim of his ear and his feet. But here's our first look at the ginormous back foot of the snowshoe hare. Definitely a plantigrade back foot there, and really big for being able to walk on top of the snow. Here's one I had to steal this off the internet. I'm going to say maybe this is like April, March, the time that I'm actually making this video. I'm making this first week of April. So you can see there's more white on the ear, more white in the body, and that big hind foot there really shows that white super bright. I took this picture in Ontario, Canada. I took this picture in February. You can see that there's some brown starting to show through. Like as the winter passes its peak, it's already late February in this picture, and it's already starting to get some brown. And again, I had to go back to the interwebs and steal one. Here's one that I would call like a December or January, full peak. So we just watched this in reverse, right? This is what it looks like when it's fully white in the winter time. And by the way, you know the term lucky rabbit's foot, right? Okay, so a hare's foot, if that was luckier, you'd get a whole lot more luck out of that if we had gone with those. let's look at them in the right order for how time works. So this would be January. This is February. This is March, April. Here's June. So we just watched this hare go from white to brown. Gosh, I hope you can see this. Taking pictures of tracks in the snow is always a little bit tricky, but I did show you earlier that snowshoe hare tracks are going to look like the same pattern as they do in Eastern Cottontail. Here I am proving it. There's the two fronts. Here's the two hinds. So if I did show you this on the test, you would just have to say lagomorph. Like if you said Eastern Cottontail for this, I'd still give you full credit. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to have you know the difference, but those pine needles are the only thing we have for scale. I didn't put down a ruler, I didn't put down a quarter. Those feet look like they're ginormous in the front there, but just knowing that this is a rabbity thing, that's cool. And I also want you to notice that snowshoe hare urine will also look discolored just like the Eastern Cottontail. I didn't want you to think it was just that one species that has urine that changes color based on what was the reason the color changes? Correct. It's the plants that they eat. This was Colorado. And finally, would you be able to tell these old worn out tracks and be able to identify them as a hare or a rabbit? And I think I would say to you that 10 years ago, when I wasn't a very good tracker, I might not recognize these at all. But we've got two fronts. Hey, I don't want to end. We've got two fronts. And then we've got our two hinds here. Very, very old. Look how worn they look. Very slow moving. And you should be able to get that from that picture with some practice. Couple bonus critters here. Jackrabbits, just so you know, are hares. I think this is what Bugs Bunny is actually a jackrabbit instead of an actual rabbit. And I just want you to count the ticks on this guy. There's one by his eye. There's one here. There's one here. And a couple in the back ear. I did mention hares get ticky. This was in Texas. And then down in Chile, the European hare has been introduced, and it was introduced on purpose because people like to hunt things, so they just drop them off in places. Would you look at how gigantic that back foot is? That's what hares are known for, really big feet. And even if they live in a place like Texas that doesn't have lots of snow, they still have ginormous feet. Our last bonus creature, and when I say bonus, I've said this to you before, it's your signal to really just watch and enjoy and not try to worry about a lot of notes. We've got one other weird lagomorph that lives in North America that would be cool to talk about. We've got hares, we've got rabbits, and then we've got pikas. And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, this is a lagomorph. So when I look at it from the outside, it looks just like an adorable hamster, right? I mean, look at those ears. Those don't scream rabbit to me. But didn't Mom teach us not to judge a book by its cover? Aren't we supposed to look at the inner qualities of an animal to see who it's related to instead of just what it's like on the outside? I mean, imagine if we just used external characteristics, like lumped all the black and white animals together, all the yellow animals together, all the brown ones. I mean, that would seem silly, wouldn't it? I mean, imagine that pile of black and white animals. You got zebras, penguins, nuns. All together, they hardly have anything in common. So to tell whether the pika belongs with the lagomorphs or not, we need to look at the tooth characteristic that I told you all lagomorphs have. So I pulled these two skull pictures off the internet, and then here's the pika one more time. And here it is from the top, but when we look at it from the side, there's the nose, there's peg, there's those little peg teeth. So for sure this is a lagomorph. Oh, and by the way, there's his version of fenestration, for those of you that remember that from the video there. Cool. Well, we go from the most adorable lagomorph on the planet, I would argue, to maybe one of the scariest. So we can't talk about rabbits without talking about the Easter Bunny, probably the most famous lagomorph of all times. We are very close to Easter right now as I'm making this. If you think this one is frightening, so obviously that kid had a little problem in it. The rabbit looks completely surprised that the child is frightened here. This isn't even the worst Easter Bunny picture that I could find. The worst one is this next one titled Easter is Canceled. Folks, look, don't blame the messenger. I'm just reporting here. It's not. I didn't create this. I wish I had been clever enough to think of this, but no, I did not think of that myself. Hey, while I've got you, can I just remind you guys that you've got a portfolio entry coming up? When is it due again? How many am I supposed to do again? How many live sightings and how many sign am I supposed to do again? Yeah, well, if you really need a reminder, your first entry is due on April 10th, and then you've got 3 more entries due on the 17th for a total of 2 live and 2 sign. So here is an example of a live. This is a muskrat, the subject of our next video. And here is a great example of sign. These are probably the prettiest possum tracks I've ever taken a picture of. Okay? Hey, if you've still got questions about this portfolio, don't just eat them. Make sure you contact me because I'd love to be able to help you out. All right, I'm Johnny Snowshoe, and that was the last